Hello, and welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show, a podcast to help you unlock tremendous growth for your app. My name is Shamant Rao. I'm the CEO of the boutique growth marketing firm Rocketship HQ and host of the podcast Mobile User Acquisition Show. In each episode, we feature experts in the field of mobile growth and discuss strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile growth marketing. By the end of each episode, you will have gained actionable and tactical insights that will help you make more informed decisions in your own work around growth. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is produced by Meryl Vincent, Content Marketing Manager at Rocketship HQ.
Our guest today is Piyush Mishra. Piyush heads the growth marketing team at Product Madness and is known in the mobile marketing space for his expertise in all things related to SKAN. Piyush also co-hosts a podcast called Level Up UA with Adam Smart. In today's episode, Piyush talks about the evolution of SKAN since its release and how marketers are still trying to figure out measurement around it. He talks about the early days of SKAN, how it's changed, and what's coming in the future. He discusses some tips and strategies for dealing with the measurement mess that SKAN has brought in its wake. These are strategies that we have found to be incredibly helpful, and we hope you will too.
I am very excited to welcome Piyush Mishra to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Piyush, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shaman. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Certainly, very excited to have you for many reasons. You are among the people who's been at the forefront of thinking and also actioning all things SKAN and iOS. You have a podcast of your own. So many reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. So very thrilled to have you here today to talk about all things SKAN, which is certainly very top of mind for a lot of mobile marketers. So let's start at the beginning, right? So SKAN 1.0 actually came out like a long time before ATT.
Yeah, I think it was 2018 or something.
Right, and I'm sure I know it was there and I just never really paid attention to it. And I think that's true for a lot of marketers. So tell us what SKAN 1.0 was like. How is it different from what it's eventually become?
So SKAN 1.0, it started, if I'm not mistaken, it started with 13.7 iOS version back in 2018 or 2019. But I think when it came about, nobody actually paid attention. That's just the truth. Most of the marketers were like, yeah, it's just there. You're getting an install postback because there was no conversion value or post-install attribute to it at that point in time. And there was no delay, this huge amount of delay in terms of conversion value that you're receiving right now, around 48 to 72 hours. So both of those things weren't there with SKAN 1.0. And, that was an IDFA world. Unless you remove IDFA, everybody was like, not adhering to a world where, or expecting a world where there would be no IDFA, although there were, now that you look at it in hindsight, you can see that there were messages from Apple throughout saying that, this might be the world that we're going to step into. But at that point in time, I wouldn't say a lot of people took a lot of attention. To be very honest, it was not a big thing. It was just providing us install postbacks.
Right. And I can see why a lot of marketers would just disregard it, because what are you going to do with just the install postback in an IDFA world?
Exactly. And nobody expected Apple to sort of build an attribution system altogether in certain sense. We did not expect that to become that big with SKAN 2.0 and 2.1 and 2.2 and whatever happened post that.
Sure. And when did you notice SKAN and that it could become something significant?
As soon as it was announced that IDFA is going to be gone, it's going to be opt-in. Users are going to have to respond on an individual app. We all started paying a lot more attention to it because that was the only solution ahead. At that point in time, we all assumed that probabilistic of fingerprinting would also be stopped, right? So at that point in time, we assumed that this was the only solution out there and we had to start paying attention to it. Now, understanding it took me more than 6 years because it was complicated, to be very honest. The whole conversion value schema, the delay associated with it, why exactly Apple is pushing it like that. It took us some time to come to terms with it. But yeah, I mean, as soon as that it was announced that there's going to be ATT and there's going to be users replying on each and every app and choosing for each and every app, it became very clear that this is a significant move from the company that has already given us LAT. And at that point in time, they had also started looking into SKAN 2.2 and post-install conversion value metrics. And that's when we started paying attention.
Sure.
And to be fair, I know there are a lot of criticism for SKAN. In my head, when it was introduced, the first thought that I had was it could create a level playing field. I mean, at the end of the day, we can all say that, MMPs are there and they're doing a great job, but there is a certain hold of Google and Facebook in certain sense in terms of attribution because they are self-reporting networks, and in fact, Apple as well, and all the other major players. So it sort of created a level playing field when it launched, and that was the first thought in my head. And I said, yeah, maybe it's the thing that we require. Now, definitely things have changed, and it's pretty clear where things are heading right now.
Yeah, it certainly has leveled the playing field quite a bit, and perhaps we'll talk about that. But since the first version of SKAN, which was just install attribution to ATT, and now there's SKAN 2.0 and 3.0, what are some of the changes that have happened in SKAN as it went to 2.0 and 3.0?
So there have been 4 releases since ATT was launched. So SKAN 2.0, SKAN 2.1, SKAN 2.2, and SKAN 3.0, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now at SKAN 2.0, what they did was introduce conversion value. That was the main focus at that point in time. And they said that post-sale conversion would be delayed. It will be aggregated. There will be no user level identifier in there. And will send the postbacks to ad networks. That was also a very, very big thing back then, and not directly to the advertisers. So it started with SKAN 2.0 at that point in time. And then 2.1 was relatively less relevant. It was mainly 2.2 when they introduced view-through conversion, because with 2.2, there was only click-through conversion. So 2.2 introduced view-through conversions also in the picture. And that's when it sort of highlighted that Apple is building a full-blown attribution solution in a certain sense. And with 3.0, that became very clear because they also started providing postbacks for situations where the ad networks are not winning the bids. It did not dive completely into multi-touch, but it started providing more information than only the last win bid and other stuff. So that happened with 3.0. Now, there's another significant change that happened, which was with iOS 15, which is basically when ad networks and advertisers both started receiving the postbacks. So right now, both of us are receiving the postbacks. We start receiving direct postbacks from Apple for all the iOS 15 users. And that's also a significant departure from where iOS 14 and 14.5 started with, because at that point in time, all the postbacks were going to ad networks first, and then to MMPs, and then to us, which was a longer process.
Sure. And with the postbacks coming back to advertisers and MMPs, like you said, the hold of the SANs is much, much weaker now, Facebook
Exactly.
and Google. Right. And we'll certainly talk about some of the mechanics of that. But you talked about conversion values. What have been some of your learnings from testing conversion value over the last many months?
We started testing conversion value right away when it released, and we have been playing with it. It's just that, I mean, it depends on the gaming genre. I'll be very honest. Mm-hmm. For us in the social casino space, relatively low number, do a purchase in the first 24 hours. Let's assume a world where it's just 24 hours because that's a more practical world. So in the first 24 hours, we have not tested anything outside the 24 hours conversion window, first of all. Second thing, apart from revenue, we started expanding and delving more into predictions. What can you do with the amount of data that you've collected till the last updated conversion value? Now, that can be looked upon in 2 different ways. One, you sort of collect enough information from the conversion value, you maximize enough information from the conversion value schema and do prediction on the basis of conversion value. The other way could be doing prediction in the conversion value schema itself. So we've been experimenting with both, and we're trying to understand which one would work better going forward, because we definitely need to maximize the output from conversion value. Third thing also, as part of the experimentation, is we are planning to look into expanding the conversion window as well from 24 hours and see how exactly that works. Because, I mean, the only drawback, as you're very, very aware, is that, you'll only get information about users who are opening the app on both the days. Now we have to back it up with data saying that how many users are actually coming back on the second day, and sort of look at it in that way. But I mean, the bunch of learnings, but I'll tell you what, it is very, very limiting. Conversion value is the reason why everybody has been panicking in the marketing world. And the other big reason is privacy threshold. I can speak days about privacy threshold, but the problem is that even after I say anything, we don't know. We just don't know. It's a black box. We don't know what it is. We don't know how it changes. I know there have been significant changes in the past 6 months. DSP started getting a lot less number of non-zero conversion values compared to SRNs. And that change came in, but it's one of the biggest limiting factors especially given the consideration that we only have to set up 100 campaign IDs, and you have to be very smarter about your conversion value schema that could potentially provide you a lot more information.
Yeah, I think the privacy threshold is certainly a big question mark. And I think what's also frustrating is that the privacy threshold has changed over time. And that's like the six blind men and the elephant. It's based on the data you're seeing, but you never are really sure what's going on. I'm also curious, Piyush, about something that you said. With conversion values, you have tested and you have leaned towards prediction-based events. Tell me more about that. What does that mean? And if you can give some examples of what that could look like.
So for example, let's say a user who has played for 6 hours, or in the hour 6, let's say, since the app open, let's assume the app open is at hour 0 and the user is playing at hour 6. Now, we always get the last updated conversion value in the SKAN raw postback, right? The last updated conversion value, if it's at hour 6, then the fact remains that you can only have 6 hours of data to do a prediction on the basis of how the user is going to do a purchase or the likelihood of a purchase in the next 7 days, versus in case of a situation where a user is coming back to play the app and we have enough amount of information, like the user is opening the app 4 times, they're doing enough number of spins, they're doing enough number of going to the lobby and other stuff, that gives us more data to predict the likelihood of a user doing a purchase. So eventually the prediction is on purchase, but it's about the data collection in the first 24 hours that you can get.
Sure.
Now, the fact remains that it will keep on changing for individual users. Sometimes you have to do prediction on the basis of 2 hours of data because the user opened the app for 2 hours and did not open it for the next 24, right? And that is the last updated conversion value that you receive. So you have to create in a step-by-step conversion value schema where you can sort of have a smarter framework so that you're tracking users who are also dropping at 22 hours as well as 24 hours, and then do prediction of the likelihood of a user purchase.
Sure. I think those examples are extremely helpful. I'm curious though, because based on my experience, I have seen that non-revenue events tend to be very poor predictors of revenue events.
Yeah.
So how do you address that? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely right, because that's been the conversation with the data science team as well. And I'll be very honest, there's no two-way about it. But the fact remains that usually in the first 24 hours period, if you just base it on revenue, then 3 or 4% of users are actually ending up doing a purchase. What about the rest 96% of the users? You need to have some information about them because that's bulk of your users, and there is a potential of those users doing a purchase eventually later. So you're absolutely right. The non-revenue events are not great predictors, but that's where we have to come in with our smartness and say that maybe we have a mix of events. For example, you can have somebody reaching the lobby, viewing an ad, and doing 100 spin, as an example. All 3 combinations together, and you set that as a conversion value schema and say that that could become a better predictor of likelihood of a purchase. So you have to be smarter about this, but you're absolutely right on that front. And even all the data science folks are also right. What we sort of disagree is marketing. It's a very experiment-based industry versus data science is very data-heavy industry. And we all have a different take on what is practical in this world and how exactly we take that and provide enough information to the partners as well for them to optimize.
Yeah, and like I said, you probably won't have to take one single event, maybe a combination of events, maybe a conditional sort of flow of events can be a better predictor than a single event. And that all makes sense. And I imagine it's also much more the case for you guys because in the social casino space, as you said, the payer percentages are really low. You have to have this sort of prediction because you're not going to get a revenue-based prediction of any sort. Not of any sort, but it's harder, I would say.
It's harder, yeah. But still, I would say, especially at product managers, I can see that, there's decent number of events that we have come up with and, that we can sort of use for doing a prediction. And also we have a decent amount of purchase in the first 24 hours that is also giving some input on how the campaign is performing. Sure. But I think we should address the elephant in the room. The fact remains that only a few networks are working with conversion value schema right now because of probabilistic being still there. So this is why it's a phase where you can do a lot of experiment. Don't know where Apple is going to head with the whole fingerprinting thing, but our probabilistic modeling, I know those two are different, but it comes from a similar sort of a background. But as long as you have probabilistic modeling in the system, it will be very, very difficult for marketers to take their head out and sort of look into conversion value schema completely because they're still used to getting that D7 ROS and D30 purchase rate
Yeah.
based on probabilistic
Yeah.
matching.
Yeah. And how do you suggest marketers compare channels just now? Because, like you said, probabilistic channels give you a ROAS, but it's also my experience based on looking at probabilistic channels that there is still some loss of signal. That's my experience. If you're getting 80% and it's actually 100% and not 80, there's some loss of signal. Google is completely modeled based on what they're doing. Facebook is SKAN, but it's also based on how they define campaigns under the hood. So how do you recommend marketers compare performance between channels just now?
It's a struggle. I'll be very honest. It's not easy because right now the problem is there's data inconsistency. Let's say you're working with 10 partners. For Facebook, you're receiving only SKAN data. For DSPs, you're receiving SKAN plus probabilistic plus deterministic data for users who are opting in on both the sides. So you have three layers of data. So the problem is it's very, very difficult to compare, but because also the fact remains that you're comparing two different attribution solutions in certain sense. One is the MMP solution and the other is Apple solution. Apple solution technically is based on Apple ID. If you calculate the redownload and other stuff, the data that we are receiving at least. And probabilistic is based on, as you said, signals that you receive. And it's by nature probabilistic as the word goes. So I wouldn't say it's fair to compete because both have their own pros and cons. Like the kind of post-install data that MMP solution gives you or the probabilistic solution gives you, that's much, much higher as compared to what Apple does. So at the end of the day, you can do experimentations. You can keep on checking because those two solutions are there and you're getting data for both. For example, on DSPs, it's not like if you're running probabilistic, you don't get data for SKAN. You're still getting data for SKAN. You can just compare the data and take the data with a pinch of salt. You can understand in what direction it's moving. So yeah, it's a struggle, but I think you can still do it. But keep in mind, those two are different attribution solutions.
Exactly. It's never going to be apples to apples, clear deterministic. I know the last time we spoke, Piyush, you said some advertisers actually figured out SKAN completely, not about as completely as it could be figured out given the privacy thresholds. Can you talk about the mechanics of how these advertisers figured it out and what about their business model or monetization model made it possible to do so?
From my own network to the self-advertisers that I have spoken to, a few of them have figured it out. And for example, one of them are using a conversion value schema purely to extract install date. And some of them, they're completely using it to do prediction within the first 24 hours. A few of them actually extended the conversion window to 48 and 72 hours, and they're experimenting with it right now, right? So everybody is doing an experimentation. I believe in case of hyper casual, especially with the whole AdMon situation and most of the money is coming from AdMon in their world, I think those are the major players who have sort of tried to expand and figure out what conversion value schema would work for them. But it's still a work in progress, but a few have figured it out.
Yeah, and I can certainly see that if they have a lot of conversion value events, I imagine some of those can be collated to get more data points about the users. So even if the exact mechanics are not clear, it doesn't surprise me that the code can be cracked, right? Not necessarily by people of all monetization models.
The code can be cracked, but think about a world, let's say there was no probabilistic right now. You would see a lot more experimentation. You would see a lot more brainstorming on SKAN and conversion schema and other stuff. And to be fair, both have pros and cons. I would not pick one against the other. But what I'm trying to say is we need to reach a world where we have just one source of data. If Apple is very sure that they're going to continue with probabilistic, maybe SRNs come on board with the idea. And this is a very big statement to throw out there. Or, if we are not going ahead with probabilistic and Apple is going to say no, then we just enter a world where it's completely SKAN and then everybody's focused on SKAN. Right now, it's the transition period, and transition period is going longer than anybody would have anticipated.
Sure. And with all of these, the somewhat complicated different sources of data, different attribution models and different channels, right? How helpful is non-deterministic measurement, right? And there are a couple of approaches that come to my mind. One could be probabilistic modeling, not like matching. One could be incrementality and media mix modeling based understanding of how much incremental lift each channel is providing. Right. And these are not really dependent on anything deterministic, but how effective would you consider?
I'm not saying this from personal experience. We have looked at them, but we have not used any of them till now. But I can say that in this world, it's worth experimenting with incrementality, because I think the input of media mix modeling historically has been more favored towards, let's say, FMCG clients and other places. It's not really meant for a gaming world, or maybe there are solutions out there that are meant for a game, but just that I haven't seen it. But on incrementality, I think it's a good, and probabilistic modeling as well, it's a good path to take just for experimentation and understanding how exactly you can extract more information and how can you use the output to define your media budget and other stuff. But again, it goes back to what I was saying before. It's all these solutions are out there, but which one is the one that's going to survive in 2022? That's been my main struggle. I don't know which one to invest my energy on, for example. If we're going to live in a non-deterministic world, maybe these options are better. But if in 2022, Apple turns off probabilistic attribution altogether, and it's only a SKAN world, then I'll invest all my energy into SKAN and maximizing the output in the first 24 hours and playing around with a lot more options that are out there. We'll have to take a call on what kind of users you don't want any information on. For example, if I want to extend my conversion window to 48 hours, am I happy with just having information about users who are opening the app on 2 days or 3 days or whatever? So those are the bigger calls that we'll have to take in a world where there's just one data source. But right now, there are these solutions out there. I would suggest definitely have a look into them and at least read about them, because these are very, very important ones.
Sure. And we talked about the postbacks are coming to the advertisers. So help us understand what are some of the things that have changed within the interfaces of, let's just say, an MMP or the platforms, and what are some of the things that change under the hood, which is what happens behind the scenes with iOS 15?
So there are a couple of things. One, definitely we have started receiving the post, but again, this goes back to the transition period where we're only receiving postbacks for iOS 15 users and not anybody who is below iOS 15, and that percentage is relatively low. The second problem with receiving the right postback is we don't have the matching key. For example, we do receive in the raw report campaign ID and ad network ID, but we don't have the key to match it to ad network name or a campaign name, because that only exists with the ad networks, right? So that is somewhat limiting. What you can do at a broader level is, for example, Facebook and Google were not sending redownload percentage, right, in the postback that were received to us directly. But now that you're receiving it directly, you can still have a directional metric saying that, the redownload percentage on Google is around 20% or something like that. Google was also, for example, converting all blank conversion value due to privacy threshold to 0, because in their head, these are at least installed. But now you will know what exactly is the percentage of rows in Google, for example, where you know that what percentage of rows are completely having null conversion value because of privacy threshold. So it has a lot more information, especially on SRNs, because they were trying to control more information. So that's a welcome change, I'll say. The other good thing is, I know people don't associate fraud with SKAN typically, but I do believe it's a good thing, because then you are receiving the postback directly. You know what is the last updated conversion value roughly. You know that nobody can play around with it. For example, if the postbacks were going to ad networks, they'll definitely know that the last updated conversion value can be fudged around and changed to something that they need to optimize towards, and they can play with it. But with iOS 15, at least, we have the control as advertisers, because we'll know what it is. But yeah, it has its pros and cons. It's a very good change. The other thing that I think we didn't talk about was related to private relay, and I'll give you a fascinating update on that, because I updated my phone to iOS 15, and I am an iCloud Plus user. So I always assume that it's going to be by default an opt-in, but that's not the case. You have to go to your setting and actually choose and switch on your private relay, and then your IP and other stuff could be hidden from tracking on Safari. So this change I did not anticipate. I thought it's going to be a default opt-in. So it's not impacting users, because it's more like LAT and not like anything else.
Help me understand the postbacks for iOS 15, right? So you're saying you can see the campaign IDs, but you do not know what campaign name it corresponds to. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. You can be smarter about it. For example, historically, because you're receiving data from ad networks directly for the past 6 months, so historically this campaign ID is associated with this campaign name, and you can sort of do a matching at your end again. But if you create a new campaign tomorrow, then you'll have to wait for campaign ID and campaign name matching from the
Right.
ad networks. And then some ad networks would not even provide it. It's up to them. You're completely reliant on them to provide it to you. So
Right.
that's a drawback.
How are you collecting these postbacks? What's the exact mechanism?
So you can import directly into your system, but what we are doing is we are using the MMP, and MMP's endpoint to sort of receive the iOS 15.
And please correct me if I'm wrong. As of now, I don't believe that there is like an interface in the MMPs where you can go in and see. Yeah.
No. So that is coming through their API or the S3 source that they have from where you can pull the data directly. So they're just doing it on our behalf. And we can pull the data from there and import in the system into your BI tool and sort of do the comparison if needed.
Yeah.
But the thing that you have to keep in mind is that you have two different sources providing the same data. One is directly coming for users on iOS 15 above, directly to advertisers or directly to MPs. And one is going to the ad network and then coming to MMPs and then coming to us. A little bit hidden and a little bit controlled by individual networks, however they want to change.
Sure. But hopefully that'll change as more iOS 15 adoption happens in the next few months, I guess. Definitely, because you just take SKAN right now, and this is again during transition period. You have users who are on SKAN 2.0, converting through 2.0, where you're only getting click-through conversion. You have inventory, which is on 2.2. Again, you're getting view through and not view through and click through. And 3.0, where you're getting multiple information about the last bid and who won and who didn't win and who was the assisted installer and whatever. So it's a mix, and on top of that, you're getting direct post for iOS 15. So even within SKAN world, there are different layers of data, and you don't have one consistent data to say that this is accurate right now. Because, for example, I was looking at the data, almost 40-45% of inventory is still on SKAN 2.0. So even your conversion, you're only getting click-through conversions for them, technically. Even if there are view-through conversions happening, you don't know. And that is why it goes back to the question when you were saying that we can compare probabilistic with SKAN. At what level would you do the comparison? Because levels are changing and it's very complicated. Yeah, definitely. Like you said, iOS itself is fragmented. Just one follow-up on the iOS 15 thing that you said, right? So you said you have to get it through the S3 endpoint, the individual postbacks. So if I understand correctly, there is no marketer-facing interface just now where they can see these validated metrics. Is that accurate? For the MMP that we are working with, it's not there. I'm pretty sure it's in their pipeline or something, but it's there in their, what they call data locker. And from there, you can just pull it. Yeah, that's also the communication I have received from other MMPs that we work with. We work with multiple ones. And it's my understanding that there's nothing that is in a UI that a marketer can log in. That it is a developer-facing interface, but not a marketer-facing interface. Yeah, because like at the end of the day, you already have one data source. That's just the truth. It's the same data source, but with more data points because it's coming to you directly. So for advertisers, we wanted, because for a cynical guy like me who would want to check if there's no fraud happening, if the redownload percentage, how many conversions happening view through and other stuff, and how many null conversions because of privacy threshold. So these are the extra information that you can extract, but you already have a data source. Most of the partners out fraud-free and doing great job. So, you already are receiving. And when you looked at the postbacks for Facebook and Google, which all these years we never had a chance to see, even pre-SKAN with IDFA, they were never sharing their raw data. Was there anything surprising? Was there anything that you feel you could learn by looking at these postbacks that were not exposed to anybody? To be honest, no. I would say because it's just that you are receiving more information. For example, with Google, as I said, the redownload, and because there was no redownload flag in Google's raw data, and with iOS 15, you're receiving it. There was, as I said before as well, like 0 as a conversion value for users, where there's for raw levels where you're not getting it because of privacy threshold. So you're getting extra information for SRNs for sure, but it's almost similar to what you were getting for other DSPs already. So there's nothing that is significantly different is what I'll say. Right. And certainly I think a lot of people wondered and speculated what the SANs might be doing under the hood. And yes, it sounds like what you're saying is not a lot that is crazy or... Yeah, I mean, look, whatever they're doing under the hood, the problem is, let's say they are creating multiple campaign IDs on Facebook, which is the truth, right? How would you associate it back? I don't know which campaign ID stands for what campaign, even within their own world. So you can't extract unless you have the key. I see what you mean. And are you saying these campaign IDs just keep changing every day, which would happen if there are multiple campaigns under the hood.
Could be, but again, the fact remains that it's fragmented. Right now, we're running a campaign on 14.5 and above, and you're getting Postbacks only for 15 and above.
Right.
You don't know what's exactly happening in that flow. So it's analysis that we would like to do when there is a good enough adoption to understand. But yeah, you can only gain information at a very broader level, at a media source level in certain sense. You can gain the split at a media source level across CTA, VTA, redownload percentage, whatever you can gain. But it has to be at a media source level. I don't see advertisers getting the match key from SRNs to know which campaign ID stands for which campaign name.
Right. You're very right, because otherwise you just can't make sense of what Facebook does here. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Piyush, it's rare for me to find somebody that I can nerd out with about SKAN and all of these very minor details, which are a huge deal, right? Because iOS is fragmented. We are all trying to make sense of what's happening. So it's such a huge deal. So thank you for sharing everything that you did today.
No, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this.
So this is perhaps a good place for us to wrap. But before we do that, could you tell folks how they can find out more about you?
Definitely, anybody can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active over there, and I like to have these conversations because every time you learn something new. It's just a fact. The ad tech world is a bit different, growing all the time. Things are changing, even for individual partners. And so it's a fascinating world to me, and I love to have a conversation. And I also co-host a podcast with Aaron Smart, sponsored by AppsFlyer. It's called Level Up UA. You can give it a shot and listen there as well.
Excellent. We will link to all of that, your LinkedIn and your podcast, certainly. But for now, I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for being on the show, Piyush.
Thank you.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.